Hi, I wanted to give some instructions here for the worm comparison activity. So, again, similar to other comparison activities from before, learning intention, we're learning about how to classify organisms so we can figure out how biologically similar they are to each other. Again, with these groups of worms, they're actually pretty distantly related to each other. But there are going to be some classifications where we see some groups that are related, some that aren't. But overall, this will give us a good chance for comparing each of these groups to one another. Success criteria: I'll be successful when I can identify biological characteristics of different types of worms, and I can make comparisons about the biological differences and similarities between each classification of worms. So, again, we're filling out a chart here with some specific groupings. So, for example, we've got tapeworm, trematode, free living flatworm, nematode, bristleworm, earthworm, and then finally leech. Again, it's quite a few different categories of worms, but again, this is just to help us get a really good comparison going. So you're going to use the little search phrases that are here in parentheses to help you get a specific species. And I can't emphasize this enough. We do want specific species. I don't want just general information about tapeworms. I don't want just general information about earthworms. Make sure that you are picking out one specific species of worm. So use the search phrase here. Again, for tapeworm, the search phrase is species of Cestota. So again, if I highlight that text here and copy it, I'm going to paste it into a Google search here. So when I do that, it'll give me several selections that I can look at. And again, you might be a little discouraged by the fact that you don't always see pictures of them. That's okay. You should still be able to find images if you go to Google Images after you select your specific one. So there's a selection of different tapeworms that I could go for here. I'm going to pick the pork tapeworm. And even though I've got the common name here, do keep in mind for the name that you're going to be putting down, we're going to put down the scientific name of that example worm. When I click on pork tapeworm, it will actually give me the scientific name when I'm going to basically look at specific information about that species. So again, I'm going to click on the magnifying glass here. Again, it says Tinea solium. So again, that is the scientific name for this particular species of tapeworm. So then once I do that, Google only pulls up results for that specific animal. So again, the other things that I'm looking for are a picture of it. I want to know the scientific phylum, the type of body cavity it has, and then the type of environment it lives in. So for the scientific name, if it's not already obvious from the search that you've done so far, Wikipedia is a pretty good source for getting the scientific name, as well as that initial classification that we're looking for, the scientific phylum. So again, when I scroll here, it gives me the scientific name for this little title of the page for that matter, but I can look at, here's the genus name and the species name. So those two together are the scientific name, Tinea solium. And the phylum is included here as well, Platyhelminthes, the flatworms. So that way I know the scientific name and the phylum. The picture, it may be included in the Wikipedia entry, but again, if you look at the Google image search for that particular species, you should get a pretty decent amount of results here. It's better to get kind of a representative picture if you can find one. I'm not as interested in getting a picture of the life cycle or anything like that. Just something that gives you an impression of what this animal looks like is the main thing that we're looking for here. So then we also want to know the type of body cavity. After we get the scientific phylum, is it Platyhelminthes, Nematoda, or Annelida? Once we know the scientific phylum, you should also be able to figure out what type of body cavity it has, either acoelomate, pseudocoelomate, or coelomate. You can click on the link here for the class slideshow for this area, this What Are Worms presentation that we went through. And again, as you click through it, you'll have two different things that will kind of help narrow in on what we're talking about. There's one section that just talks about body cavities. So it does mention specific worm groups. So, for example, body cavities, acoelomates, animals with no body cavity, like Platyhelminthes, are called acoelomates. So, since I know that my tapeworm is part of the Platyhelminthes, I know it's an acoelomate. The other way to look at this information, after you leave the body cavities section, you'll also have a part where we're talking about those different phylums. So again, here's phylum Platyhelminthes, And there you can see the keyword acoelomate is highlighted. So you can look it up either way. You can either look at the different body cavity categories or the different phylum categories, and you should be able to make the connection between those two. And then finally, what type of environment does it live in? Is it freshwater, saltwater, soil, or potentially is it a specific host organism? There are quite a few examples with this where it is a parasite and it's an internal parasite. The pork tapeworm is a good example of this. So if it is an internal parasite, I want to know what type of animal does it live inside of. With at least one example, you can list several if you feel inclined to, that's fine. So again, I can look at the Wikipedia info for it. I can look at, oftentimes you'll have a thing from the Center for Disease Control or CDC about that type of infection. But let's go ahead and look at the Wikipedia entry here and what it says. So it mentions here, you can see words like hosts, which tell you that you're talking about host organisms. So what it mentions here, it is a tapeworm that uses humans as its definitive host and pigs as the intermediate or secondary hosts. Probably not a big surprise when we're talking about it being the pork tapeworm that it does show up in pigs. So again, for that specific host organism, you could say human, you could say pig, you could list both of them. Anything that lets us know at least one of the specific host organisms that it lives in. But again, if it doesn't live inside of a host, describe the environment as best you can. Again, the most simple ways to approach it are freshwater, saltwater, and soil, but you can get more specific if you find more specific information. Once you're done filling out the chart, you've got some reflection questions down here at the bottom. Number one, what do you notice that's similar about all the Platyhelminthes worms? Think about what you can observe in the information presented in the class slideshow. So again, that linked class slideshow will give you some general characteristics of Platyhelminthes. But if you look for all of the lines where you've got Platyhelminthes listed for the phylum, you can also just talk about what you notice that they have in common. For Nematoda, there's only going to be one row with an example that are nematodes. So I want you to tell me about what is different about that group compared to the other worms there. Think about what you can observe, and again, the information presented in the class slideshow. And then finally, for Annelida, also I want you to look at each row that mentions Annelida in the phylum. Tell me what you notice that is similar between all of them. Again, look at your observations and the info in the class slideshow. And then looking at the chart in total, what is different between all the example worms? Again, think about what you can observe in the information from the slideshow. So again, just helps us with our comparison there. So I hope this is a good little kind of introduction into these different worm groups. Again, they're very diverse from one another, and I'm hoping that this assignment helps you figure out some of those key differences.